I never thought the worst betrayal of my life would be solved by a broken garbage disposal. Standing in my childhood kitchen 3 years later, watching the repairman pull apart the mangled machine, I felt my world shift completely. That twisted piece of platinum and the crushed sapphire sitting in his palm were all that remained of my grandmother's ring. The same ring my sister Samantha had accused me of stealing, the accusation that tore my family apart and left me homeless at 28. Before I tell you how a simple plumbing repair changed everything, let me know where you are watching from, and please hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family secrets that come to light in the most unexpected ways. What happened next will leave you speechless. Growing up in our two-story house on Maple Street in Albany, New York, I thought our family was pretty typical. Dad David managed the local hardware store, working long hours but always making time for Sunday dinners. Mom Susan taught third grade at the elementary school, where both Samantha and I had been students. She had this way of making everyone feel special, whether it was her students or her daughters. My sister Samantha was 25, 3 years younger than me, and everything I was not. Where I was serious about my job at the insurance company, she was the kind of person who lit up every room she walked into. She had been homecoming queen in high school, dated the football captain, and now worked as a receptionist at a dental office. Everyone loved Samantha instantly. Her laugh was infectious, her smile could charm anyone, and she had this natural ability to make people feel like they were the most important person in the world. I was Patricia, the responsible older sister. I paid my bills on time, saved money for the future, and rarely missed a day of work. While Samantha spent her weekends shopping or going to parties, I preferred quiet evenings reading or organizing my small apartment. Our personalities were completely different, but we had always gotten along well. Or at least I thought we had. The centerpiece of our family's history was Grandmother Margaret's ring. It sat in Mom's jewelry box like a small treasure, a platinum band holding a deep blue sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. Grandmother Margaret had survived the Great Depression, raised 4 children, including my father, and lived to be 93. The ring represented everything strong and enduring about our family. The tradition was simple but meaningful. When the oldest daughter turned 28, she would inherit the ring. Mom had received it from Grandmother Margaret when she was 28. Now it would be my turn. I had been looking forward to this moment for as long as I could remember. As a little girl, I would sneak into Mom's room just to look at it, imagining the day it would finally be mine. Samantha had always admired the ring too. Sometimes she would ask Mom if she could try it on, and Mom would let her wear it for a few minutes around the house. But we both understood the tradition. It would go to me first, and someday when I was older, I might pass it down to her. There was never any jealousy about it, or so I believed. March arrived with the promise of spring, and my 28th birthday was just a week away. I had been planning this celebration for months, not because I particularly enjoyed parties, but because this birthday felt different. This was when I would officially become a full member of the family tradition, carrying on something that connected me to generations of strong women before me. I bought a new dress specifically for the occasion, a simple blue one that would complement the sapphire. Mom and I had talked about having a small dinner party with close family and a few friends. Samantha seemed excited about the celebration, offering to help with decorations and food preparation. She suggested we make Grandmother Margaret's favorite lemon cake, and I thought it was a perfect idea. The week leading up to my birthday felt magical. Work seemed less stressful, the weather was getting warmer, and I felt genuinely happy about my life. I had a stable job, a close family, and soon I would have a piece of jewelry that connected me to my heritage. Everything seemed perfect. But on the morning of my birthday, everything changed. I arrived at my parents' house early to help with preparations, excited to finally receive the ring. Mom was in her bedroom, and I could hear her moving things around frantically. When I called out to ask if she needed help, her voice came back shaky and confused. She could not find the ring anywhere. The jewelry box where it had always lived was empty except for her other pieces. We searched through her entire bedroom, thinking maybe she had moved it for safekeeping. We looked in dresser drawers, closets, and even the bathroom cabinets. The ring had simply vanished. The birthday celebration that evening felt hollow. Family members kept asking about the ring, and Mom had to explain over and over that it was temporarily missing. I tried to stay positive, telling everyone we would find it soon and have a proper ring ceremony later. But inside I felt crushed. This was supposed to be one of the most important days of my life, and instead of joy, I felt empty and disappointed. 2 days later, everything fell apart completely. Samantha came home late from work, and I could tell immediately something was wrong. Her eyes were red from crying, and she kept avoiding eye contact with everyone. When Mom asked what was bothering her, Samantha broke down completely. Through tears, she told our parents that she had seen me sneaking into their bedroom the night before my birthday. She claimed I had been going through Mom's jewelry box looking for the ring. According to Samantha, I had taken it to sell so I could pay off my credit card debt. She said I had confessed everything to her when I was drunk at a bar the previous weekend. I stood there listening to my sister destroy my life with words that came so easily to her. The details she provided were specific and convincing. She knew about the $3,500 I owed on my credit card from car repairs earlier that year. She knew I had been stressed about money. She even claimed I had told her my plan to sell the ring and then pretend it was stolen. My parents stared at me with expressions I had never seen before. Disappointment mixed with disbelief. Dad's face turned red with anger, while Mom just looked broken. They wanted to know if what Samantha was saying was true. Of course it was not true. I told them exactly that, but my denials sounded weak even to my own ears. The evidence Samantha had presented seemed overwhelming. I had been in financial stress. I did have access to their bedroom, and most damning of all, my own sister was accusing me with tears in her eyes. Within hours, Dad had searched through my laptop and found my browsing history from the previous month. There were searches for pawn shops and jewelry appraisers in the area. What he did not know was that I had been researching these places to sell some old jewelry I had inherited from a great aunt, not to steal from my own family. But combined with everything else, it looked incredibly suspicious. Dad also found text messages on my phone where I had complained to a friend about needing money quickly to pay off my credit card before the interest rate increased. In context, these messages seemed to support Samantha's story perfectly. I tried to explain the real reasons behind everything, but my parents were already convinced. The worst part was watching Samantha during these confrontations. She would look at me with what appeared to be genuine sadness and disappointment. She kept saying things like, "I cannot believe you would do this to our family, and I love you, but I cannot protect you from the truth anymore." Her performance was so convincing that even I began to doubt my own memories for brief moments. The tension in our house became unbearable over the next few days. Dad would barely speak to me, and when he did, his voice was cold and formal. Mom tried to maintain some normalcy, but I could see the hurt in her eyes every time she looked at me. Dinner conversations were stilted and uncomfortable, with Samantha playing the role of the heartbroken sister who had been forced to reveal a terrible truth. I spent hours trying to figure out what had really happened to the ring. I searched every inch of the house when no one else was home. I contacted local pawn shops to ask if anyone had tried to sell a ring matching that description. I even offered to take a polygraph test, but Dad said that would not prove anything, since some people could beat those tests. The accusations were destroying my relationship with my parents, but they were also changing how I saw Samantha. Small things from our childhood started making sense in a new way. Times when my toys had gone missing, and she had helped me look for them. Occasions when I had gotten in trouble for things I was certain I had not done. Moments when she had seemed just a little too helpful, a little too concerned, a little too perfect. Everything came to a head 1 week after Samantha's accusations. Dad called a formal family meeting in our living room, the same room where we had celebrated holidays and birthdays for decades. The atmosphere felt more like a trial than a family discussion. He told me that I had brought shame to our family and betrayed their trust in the worst possible way. The missing ring represented more than just jewelry. It was a symbol of everything our family stood for. By stealing it, I had stolen part of our history and identity. Then came the ultimatum that changed my life forever. I had to leave the house immediately. I could not come back until I returned the ring and apologized to the entire family for what I had done. Dad's voice was steady and cold, as he delivered this sentence like he was reading from a legal document rather than talking to his daughter. I begged them to reconsider. I got down on my knees in that living room and swore on everything I held sacred that I had not taken the ring. I offered to pay for a private investigator. I suggested we install cameras in the house to prove my innocence when the real thief returned. Nothing I said made any difference. Samantha sat quietly during most of this meeting, occasionally wiping away tears. Near the end, she spoke up to say that she hoped I would do the right thing and confess. She told me that the family would forgive me if I just told the truth and made things right. Her voice was soft and caring, but I was starting to recognize something cold underneath that caring tone. That night, I packed a single suitcase with my most essential belongings. 28 years of life in that house and everything important to me fit into one small bag. As I folded my clothes, I could hear Samantha moving around in her room next door. At one point, she appeared in my doorway. "I really hope you will think about what you are doing," she said quietly. "This does not have to destroy our family forever. Just tell Mom and Dad where the ring is, and everything can go back to normal." There was something in her eyes that I had never noticed before, a kind of satisfaction that she was trying to hide behind concern. I left the house the next morning without saying goodbye to anyone. Mom was at work, Dad was at the store, and Samantha was still sleeping. I loaded my suitcase into my car and drove away from Maple Street without looking back. I felt like my entire identity had been erased overnight. The next 3 years were the hardest of my life, but they were also the years that taught me who I really was. I found a small studio apartment in a rundown neighborhood 40 minutes from my childhood home. The rent was cheap, but the building was noisy, and the heat barely worked in winter. I took on extra hours at work and picked up freelance projects to pay for my new life. Loneliness was the worst part. I had lost my family, and most of our mutual friends had heard some version of Samantha's story. People I had known for years started treating me differently. Some avoided me entirely, while others would ask pointed questions about family problems that made it clear they knew something. But I also discovered strengths I never knew I had. I learned to fix my own plumbing when pipes leaked. I figured out how to negotiate with landlords and manage a tight budget. I made new friends, including Isabella, a Puerto Rican woman who worked in accounting at my company. Isabella became my closest friend, and she never once asked me to explain my family situation. During those 3 years, I tried calling home several times. The conversations were brief and painful. Mom would answer and immediately start crying. Dad would take the phone and ask if I was ready to tell them where the ring was. When I maintained my innocence, he would hang up. Eventually, I stopped calling. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Samantha had gotten engaged to her long-term boyfriend, Mark. They were planning a big wedding, and apparently the whole family was excited. I was not invited, of course. Later, I learned they had bought a house 2 streets away from my parents, and that Samantha was pregnant with their first child. Then on a cold Tuesday in March, exactly 3 years after the ring had disappeared, Isabella called me with news that changed everything. Dad had suffered a stroke at work and was in the hospital. It was not life-threatening, but it was serious enough that the family was gathering. Mom had asked Isabella to contact me since she had my current phone number. I spent the entire day debating whether to go to the hospital. Part of me wanted to rush there immediately, But another part wondered if my presence would just create more drama during an already stressful time. Finally, I decided that regardless of what had happened between us, Dad was still my father. Walking into that hospital felt like stepping back in time. Mom looked older and more tired than I remembered, but her face lit up when she saw me. She hugged me tightly and whispered apologies that I did not fully understand at the time. Dad was awake and alert, and while he did not say much, he squeezed my hand when I sat beside his bed. Samantha was there too now, clearly pregnant and wearing a wedding ring. She seemed surprised to see me, and there was something in her expression that looked almost like fear. We barely spoke to each other that first day at the hospital, but I noticed she watched me carefully whenever I was talking to Mom or Dad. Over the next few days, as Dad's condition improved, Mom asked if I would come to the house to help sort through some of his paperwork. Insurance forms needed to be filled out, and she was overwhelmed by all the details. I agreed even though returning to Maple Street felt surreal. The house looked exactly the same, but walking through it felt like visiting a museum of my former life. My old bedroom had been converted into a nursery for Samantha's baby, painted yellow, with teddy bear decorations. All evidence of my 28 years in that house had been carefully erased. While Mom and I worked on the insurance paperwork in the kitchen, we heard a loud grinding noise from the garbage disposal. Mom sighed and said it had been making that sound for weeks, but Dad had been too busy to fix it. Since he was still recovering, she had finally called a repairman to come look at it. Tony the plumber arrived within an hour. He was a friendly man in his 50s who immediately diagnosed the problem as something stuck deep in the disposal mechanism. He explained that he would need to disconnect the unit and take it apart to remove whatever was blocking it. I was sitting at the kitchen table filling out medical forms when Tony started pulling pieces of mangled metal from the disposal. At first he found the usual things: bottle caps, small utensils, bits of aluminum foil. But then his expression changed. "Ladies, you might want to see this," he said, holding up a piece of twisted platinum. Even damaged and discolored, I recognized it immediately. My heart stopped completely as he continued pulling out fragments, pieces of blue stone, tiny diamonds, and more bent metal that had once been a ring band. Mom gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. We both stared at the mangled remains of Grandmother Margaret's ring, destroyed by 3 years of grinding in the garbage disposal. The sapphire was cracked into several pieces, and the platinum band was twisted beyond repair, but there was no doubt about what we were looking at. "How long has your disposal been making noise?" Tony asked, continuing to examine the fragments. "At least 3 years," Mom whispered. "We just learned to live with it." I felt the world shift around me as the implications became clear. The ring had not been stolen. It had been accidentally dropped down the kitchen sink and destroyed in the disposal, probably on the very night it went missing. For 3 years, my family had believed I was a thief, and I had lost everything because of a lie. But if the ring had been in the disposal all this time, that meant Samantha's entire story was fabricated. She had not seen me steal anything. I had not confessed to her while drunk. She had made up every single detail of her accusation, knowing that the ring was already destroyed and that I could never produce it to prove my innocence. I called Samantha immediately and told her she needed to come to the house right away. My voice must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation, because she arrived within 20 minutes looking nervous and pale. When I showed her the ring fragments, her face went completely white. She tried to maintain her composure, at first suggesting that maybe someone else had thrown the ring down the drain after stealing it. But I was no longer the naive person who had accepted false accusations 3 years earlier. I laid out the timeline methodically. The ring had disappeared the night before my birthday. The disposal had been making noise for 3 years, according to Mom. No thief would break into a house just to destroy a ring in the garbage disposal. The only logical explanation was that the ring had been accidentally dropped down the drain that night. "But that doesn't change what you told me at the bar," Samantha said, her voice getting higher and more desperate. You still confessed to taking it. That was when I knew I had her. Samantha, I was never at a bar with you that weekend. I spent Saturday night at Isabella's apartment watching movies, and she will testify to that. You made up the entire conversation. Under pressure with Mom demanding answers, and the evidence literally sitting on the table in front of her, Samantha finally broke down. Through tears and guilt, she confessed to everything. She had taken the ring from Mom's jewelry box the night before my birthday. She wanted to show it to her boyfriend Mark, to hint about engagement rings and marriage. She had been drinking and got careless while washing her hands in the kitchen sink. The ring slipped off her finger and disappeared down the drain before she could catch it. Panicked and terrified of getting in trouble, she had turned on the disposal hoping to push it through the system. Instead, she had destroyed it completely. When everyone started looking for the ring the next day, she was too scared to admit what had happened. I was going to confess, she sobbed. But then everyone was so upset, and I knew Dad would be furious with me. When Patricia got blamed, it just seemed easier to let everyone believe it. I never thought it would go this far. But it had gone much further than she had ever intended. Her lie had cost me 3 years of my life, my relationship with my parents, and my sense of identity. While she had been building a life with Mark, getting married and preparing to have children, I had been struggling alone in a tiny apartment cut off from everyone I loved. Mom and Dad were devastated when they fully understood what had happened. Dad, still recovering from his stroke, looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Mom could not stop crying and apologizing. They both begged me to forgive them and asked me to move back home immediately. But I was not the same person who had left that house 3 years earlier. The experience of being falsely accused and abandoned had changed me fundamentally. I had learned to rely on myself completely, to question things that seemed too convenient, and to value people who truly knew and trusted me. I told my parents that I needed time to process everything that had happened. I was not ready to simply return to the family dynamic that had allowed such a massive injustice to occur. If we were going to rebuild our relationship, it would have to be on new terms. I also insisted that Samantha face real consequences for her actions. She needed to publicly apologize to everyone who had heard her false accusations against me. She needed to seek counseling to understand why she had been willing to destroy her sister's life to avoid taking responsibility for an accident. And she needed to accept that our relationship might never recover from what she had done. Standing in that kitchen looking at the destroyed remains of our grandmother's ring, I realized that some things can be rebuilt and some things cannot. My relationship with my parents would take time and work, but it was possible. My trust in Samantha was probably gone forever. The ring itself was beyond repair, but what it had represented, the strength and resilience of the women in our family, lived on. I had proven that I possessed those qualities not by inheriting a piece of jewelry, but by surviving betrayal and emerging stronger. 3 years of pain had taught me that family is not just about blood relationships or shared history. Family is about people who believe in you when others do not, who stand by you when times are difficult, and who love you for who you really are. I had found that kind of family with Isabella and other friends who had accepted me without judgment. The broken ring had revealed the truth about my biological family, but it had also revealed the truth about myself. I was stronger than I had ever known, more resilient than I had imagined, and capable of building a life based on my own values rather than other people's expectations. Sometimes the most painful betrayals teach us the most valuable lessons about who we really are. That broken garbage disposal did not just reveal pieces of a ring, it revealed the truth about my family, and more importantly, about my own strength. What would you do if your own family accused you of something you did not do? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted had been lying to you for years? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please give this video a like if it made you think about the importance of standing up for yourself even when it is difficult. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding your inner strength. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they can survive anything life throws at them. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes losing the family you were born into helps you find the family you are meant to have.